Hello and welcome to Flourishing and AI, a Cordon Sanitaire for your humanity. This is a very exciting essay because it's the last essay of part one of this book that I'm trying to craft. Part one has all been about understanding why maybe we're not flourishing in the age of the machine and defining flourishing in both a kind of ancient philosophical perspective, but also a modern reaction to technology perspective. This is followed by the 5 C's of human flourishing. I feel like every book like this needs a bit of alliteration somewhere in the middle. These are creativity, craft, curation, community, and care. Practical things that we do that make us feel more human that I think is going to be more important as we continue this age of technological abundance. And then part 3 is going to be a look at how these 5 C's and how our understanding of flourishing aligns to governments, to companies, to employers, to employees, and ultimately to ourselves. This essay was actually really hard to write, because life is getting very busy. If anyone is watching this on the video, you can probably see a very, very messy room with lots of kids' toys and things like that. So that's keeping me very busy. But it's also a hard essay to write because it is incredibly depressing. The first half of it, at least. And I'm sorry to be so negative and to be so fatalistic, but there are glimmers of hope. I talk about how we can create a cordon sanitaire, a safe space away from these intrusive technologies, including artificial intelligence, in our minds, in our home, and in nature. Having these safe spaces, these moments where we don't have a device, where we're not connected, is going to be so important for our flourishing and for our perspective setting and for our rejuvenation as well. So I hope you enjoy this essay. It's another bit of it's another beast. I will take a couple of weeks off to consolidate all of part one, make sure that it reads well, it reads consistently, and to start working on the first C, creativity. On with the essay. Flourishing and AI, a cordon sanitaire for your humanity. Our generation's Faustian bargain has been to sacrifice our soul for convenience. Technology's creep into our homes and minds has been both subtle and insidious. In exchange for personalization, customization, and convenience, we willingly sacrifice our agency, our privacy, and ultimately our humanity. Today, we freely give away our data to feed the appetites of these insatiable technology companies. For these companies, we are rich seams of monetizable data to be mined, refined, and packaged to the highest bidder. Data is the gasoline that keeps the engine of artificial intelligence spinning. No amount is enough. Smartphones and smart glasses, smart mattresses, and smart vacuum cleaners are all emissaries, gathering data to feed hungry algorithms which seek to ingest, reconstitute, and monetize our personal lives for private profit. The Harvard professor Shoshana Zuboff calls it surveillance capitalism, the network of technologies that seeks to mine the living world for profit. This degenerate form of capitalism unilaterally claims human experience as free raw material for the translation of behavioral data. With artificial intelligence, the creep goes further. AI wishes it were human, craving the information we receive from what we see, smell, touch, and hear. Like prospectors mining for rare earth minerals, these companies acknowledge that they have only extracted a tiny percentage of the total known reserves of data from the real world. To map the world, it needs devices everywhere, down every farmer's track and in every forest clearing. To map the home, it needs to be connected, smart, an Internet of Things, constantly storing data about our intimate needs, wants, and desires. To mine our inner worlds, it needs ever more compelling ways of providing utility and convenience. Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. One thinks himself the master of others and still remains a greater slave than they. This opening to Rousseau's social contract speaks of the relationship between individuals and the state. However, it could easily be referring to our relationship with artificial intelligence. We are led to believe that these technologies are emancipatory, offering limitless power and opportunities in our pockets. However, as these technologies become more integrated into our lives, we risk becoming enslaved by them. We want to be able to switch off. We believe that we have the agency to extract ourselves from these webs of useful, time-saving tools. But in reality, we are enslaved by utility and convenience and social conventions. This essay argues for a cordon sanitaire to protect our humanity, the provision of safe spaces free from the technologies of surveillance capitalism. In John Stuart Mill's 1848 Principles of Political Economy, he speaks of the need for a circle around every individual human being, a safe space without external constraints or oversight. The psychologist Dahl Pedersen goes further, speaking of the human requirement for a boundary control process, privacy functions which enable contemplation, autonomy, rejuvenation, confiding, freedom, creativity, recovery, catharsis, and concealment. To flourish, there must be neutral zones, forever out of the reach of predatory surveillance capitalists. These spaces in nature, our homes, and in our minds must be protected and cherished at all costs. How we got here. In his 1960 book, The Strategy of Desire, ad man Ernst Dichter spoke of human motivation as an iceberg, with the most consequential 2/3 hidden from view. He argued that by burrowing deep beneath the surface and accessing consumers' hidden emotions, irrational behaviors, and unconscious desires, it would become obvious how to market a product. A post-war consumer capitalism prompted companies to employ legions of psychoanalysts, depth boys, to mine the precious insights stored deep within the iceberg. The goal was to make products that customers didn't even realize they wanted. The problem was the difficulty in finding reliable heart-of-iceberg data. Focus groups, in-depth interviews, and surveys only excavated the visible third of the iceberg. These companies needed to know their customers' thoughts when they didn't know that they were being analyzed. And even if these companies managed to access our deepest insecurities, wants, and desires, the mediums of advertising were frustratingly generic. Television, radio, billboards, and flyers were all extremely inefficient, blunt tools which reached many eyeballs, but few prospective customers. However, with the birth of the internet and its subsequent device-enabled ubiquity, companies now had the right equipment to mine the iceberg and the refined tools to target individuals with products they didn't even know they wanted. At first, companies designed products which help users get better search results, buy things quickly and cheaply, and connect with friends around the world. However, it soon became apparent that those users were more than willing to reveal their preferences in a search box or profile update than in a focus group or in a survey. Suddenly, these technology companies realized that they had stumbled upon an extremely cheap and remarkably effective way of mining the iceberg. The masterstroke was to match this information to personalized advertising. All these companies had to do was provide a suitably convenient, somewhat necessary, appropriately useful interface for us to pour out our souls, so we would remain engaged long enough to catch a glimpse of a targeted advert. The game was afoot. Proto-monopolists from Amazon and Facebook to Google and Netflix launched products which mined as much monetizable data as possible, whilst keeping us connected at all times to their advertising interfaces. For these Wild West prospectors, 24 hours was the target. The goal was to consume as much of our attention as possible and use it to channel targeted advertising. It wasn't enough to restrict this to a single device we kept in our pocket or on our desks, so we introduced the Internet of Things, smart everything, capturing our data and selling us things. But why stop there? The problem with humans is that they are deeply irrational, wanting something one day, changing their mind the next. It didn't provide particularly stable revenue streams for the surveillance capitalists or the advertisers spending millions of dollars on their platforms. In 2010, then CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, took the stage at the Washington Ideas Forum and proudly asserted that Google knows where you are, knows where you have been, and knows more or less what you're thinking about. And so, with this mastery of past and present, these technology companies used every trick in the book to manufacture our future. Armed with legions of behavioral economists, benefiting from a product suite which is integrated into almost every part of our very online lives, these companies set about nudging us towards certain wants, needs, and desires. Zuboff calls it the search for guaranteed outcomes. Like a landlord having visibility over future rental income, these companies sought to guarantee revenue through a combination of an entrenched monopoly position and effectively wielding the tools of surveillance capitalism. But it still wasn't enough. The advent of generative artificial intelligence saw a new arms race for data and eyeballs. The companies with the most connected devices and the most trafficked websites became the most valuable sources of data, feeding the insatiable appetites of large language models. Multimodal models, with the ability to generate images, video, text, and audio, relied upon billions of real-world data points to provide useful outputs. The more data, the better the models, the more eyeballs, the greater the monetization. These surveillance capitalists speak of the inevitability of it all, the steamroller of progress. Regardless of whether you like it or not, your home will be connected, you will be tracked wherever you go, you will be fed personalized advertising and pacified by zero royalty entertainment, your mind turned to mush by extremely helpful chatbots. And there's nothing we can do. Nearly 50 years ago, in 1977, the social scientist Landon Winner lamented our collective nihilism. The changes and disruption that an evolving technology repeatedly caused in modern life were accepted as given or inevitable simply because no one bothered to ask whether there were any other possibilities. But what if the techno-nihilists were wrong? What if there was something we could do? Protecting your humanity. Outside. In one of the most profound scenes from George Orwell's 1984, we find the protagonist Winston and his companion Julia escaping the clutches of telescreens and microphones, escaping to the golden country of his youth. In reality, their illicit voyage had only taken them into London suburbs, to a patch of scrub which Julia confirms is free from constant surveillance. There was something about this unencumbered nature that transformed Winston. The sweetness of the air and the greenness of the leaves, the innocence of nature that elevated his spirits and reinvigorated his resistance to Big Brother's cloying omniscience. In this scene, you feel Winston's excitement. It all feels illicit, scandalous, degenerate even. Yet at the same time, Winston recalls this golden country that reminded him of the old, unknown world of his childhood, or of some time even earlier than that. Despite Big Brother's omniscience, despite all the brainwashing and doublethink, deep down, Winston acknowledges that it's all just an artifice. It is in nature that something ancient, something permanent, something real resides. Nature has the wonderful effect of uniting both poet and scientist. In nature, there exists both satisfying logic and endless inspiration. Nature is somehow both stark in its simplicity and limitless in its complexity. It has the power to elevate the soul of the humble dog walker and the tenured physicist. Nature, prosaic and profound, exists without the need to assert its agency upon us. Its objectives are clear for all to see. It does not exploit or extract. It doesn't double-cross or deceive. Step back and you see the sublime. Look closely and you see balance and flux, a reason for every stem and every whisker. There is nothing new about our desire to subdue the earth. We depend on nature's bounty to survive and grow. However, the transaction has formerly been explicit. We plant and harvest to eat. We dig and mine to extract resources for our development. We scale mountains and walk across deserts to assert our dominance upon the world. However, the innocence of these pursuits has been tainted by the insatiable creep of surveillance capitalism. If surveillance capitalists had their own way, we would exist in a sterile, controlled environment, a metaverse where everything is data and therefore everything can be monetized. These technologists cannot monetize regions where devices aren't connected or where technology's eyes and ears are not present. Short of the metaverse, surveillance capitalists demand smart cities, imploring connectivity across the developed world, sending armies of satellites to ensure that nothing escapes before it can be rendered as data. Nowadays, there is something incomprehensibly freeing about going for a walk without a smartphone. Maybe it's the weight of it, heavy and significant in a trouser pocket. Maybe it's the overwhelming possibilities contained within the tangle of slick metal, glass, and circuitry, compelling us to look something up or jot something down. Maybe it's the sense that although we are on our own, amidst the immortality of nature, we are still connected to surveillance capitalism's mycelium network, its bungee cord making sure we don't stray too far. Or maybe it's the silent pull of the device's pathetic desire for ever more information. It is desperate to be held, hungry for a photo, for you to glance at a map, to track your steps, so it can turn every single interaction into data. Give technology an inch, and it will take a mile. Fitness trackers, smartwatches, wearables, augmented reality glasses, they all promise convenience in exchange for dominion over the outside world. To flourish, we must ensure that there are spaces out there in nature that exist without the agency of technologies owned by companies whose interests do not align to our own. In the home. There's a wonderful scene in C.S. Lewis's The Magician's Nephew where Polly shows Diggory her secret den up in the eaves of her parents' terraced house. Her attic refuge was a sort of cave in the world of tiles and chimneys. It was a safe space, a space to write and eat apples, a space to store her treasures, the ginger beer bottles and the cash box. This wonderfully cozy space up in the attic was Polly's domain, free from nagging parents and troublesome neighbors. It was a place to return to after adventures further afield. It was also a space for imagination, for writing, for unbounded creativity. We need both open spaces and cozy places to retreat. There is nothing so satisfying as closing our front door on the world, leaving behind traffic and neighbors, geopolitics, and macroeconomics. Philosopher and ex-postal worker Gaston Bachelard saw the house as the center of intimacy. Not simply planes and right angles, but a corner of the world that provides the environment for the cradle of our earliest daydreams. He continues, the house shelters daydreaming. The house protects the dreamer. The house allows one to dream in peace. The house is one of the greatest powers of integration for the thoughts, memories, and dreams of mankind. It is body and soul. It is the human being's first world. Before he is cast into the world, man is laid in the cradle of the house. Life begins well. It begins enclosed, protected, all warm in the bosom of the house. Home is the place we return to. When weary from travel and adventure, there is something extremely comforting in returning to find our bearings, to see our possessions just where we left them. In this sense, we are much like other animals. As Shoshana Zuboff observes, birds, bees, butterflies, nests, holes, trees, lakes, hives, hills, shores, and hollows, nearly every creature shares some version of this deep attachment to a place in which it has been known to flourish, the kind of place that we can call home. For surveillance capitalists, the home is also a rich source of high-quality data. The home is where we are at our most unfiltered, our most intimate, our most real. It is a place of sweatpants and long baths, of entire bars of chocolate and not enough fruit. It is a place of gossip and bad attitudes. A place free from public opprobrium. Smart devices, speakers and thermostats, mattresses and doorbells, all seek to extract precious data from our most private moments. These smart devices have infiltrated our safe spaces, tracking and watching us, maybe even listening in to our dinner time conversations, stock taking the contents of our fridges, mapping the floors of our homes. They are the Trojan horse of our homes, infiltrating the prosaic and the intimate. Connectivity is no longer confined to the lonely family desktop, but instead exists everywhere, a digital omniscience taking over house and home. All this control, this connectivity, these smart devices promise convenience in exchange for our redundancy. If everything is connected, then everything is fragile. If our house is controlled by technology, we no longer understand, we no longer feel a sense of mastery over the place that we can call home. If vital data keeps leaking out from our house into an unknowable cloud, then how can we feel protected by the physicality of bricks and mortar? When asked his thoughts on the future of the internet at Davos in 2015, Eric Schmidt asserted that the internet will likely disappear. There will be so many IP addresses, so many devices, sensors, things that you are wearing, things that you are interacting with, that you won't even sense it. It will be part of your presence all the time. Imagine you walk into a room and the room is dynamic. Schmidt clearly sees this as a positive thing. A digital world liberated from frustrations of plastic boxes and clunky monitors, existing everywhere, ingesting every crumb of monetizable data. The insidious creep of surveillance capitalism has inverted our relationship with the digital connected realm. Before, computers and phones and watches were tools made for us, for our exploitation. Now we exist within their world. Pulsing sensors, throbbing trackers, needy devices, controlling our homes and our lives. A cordon sanitaire needs to be erected around our homes. Technology must return to its place as a tool for our utility and our exploitation. Any digital devices aligned to an agency that does not benefit us must not be allowed to enter the home. A middle finger to these surveillance capitalists is a desktop computer, a dumb phone, fridges that don't monitor what's inside, toothbrushes that aren't Bluetooth connected, doorbells that simply ring. In our minds. To flourish, we must protect the sanctity of our minds at all costs. Our minds must be unencumbered, free to think deeply and extensively, able to find conviction and then assert our agency onto the world. Conversely, the business model of surveillance capitalism is to know as much as possible about our past, present, and future, and then to sell the data to the highest bidder. Their goal is to erode our conviction and predict our future for the purpose of consistent double-digit revenue growth. Needy devices want to get closer and closer to our bodies and our minds, moving from fixed desktops through to always in-pocket smartphones, wearables, and, if the dreams of techno-utopians are to be fulfilled, into our brains. These companies undermine our agency, in part by flooding the zone, overwhelming us with so much information that we have little choice but to click accept, acknowledging the hundreds of pages of complex privacy policies and digital contracts. Shoshana Zuboff calls this the age of the uncontract. Contracts have become so complex and products so insistent that we have lost agency and dominion over our digital world. Companies limit features if we choose not to allow our device to be constantly connected or our data liberally shared. These companies also excel in shaping our behavior, nudging us to complete 10,000 steps, notifying us when we've watched too much YouTube, reminding us to turn the heating down. As we become more dependent on these devices, we lose our ability to make our own decisions or to assert our agency on the world, and ultimately resigning ourselves to the inevitability of progress. Artificial intelligence has made everything harder. The urge to outsource our research, our thinking, our writing, ourselves, to extremely willing chatbots is overwhelming. It is remarkably easy to become dependent on our trusty AI companions. This reliance comes at the expense of self-confidence. It is so easy to quickly check things that we already know, or to rewrite a paragraph that we are more than capable of doing ourselves. We quickly become incapable of action unless our chatbots have worked through the logic and have provided their seal of approval. The outsourcing of our agency to artificial intelligence comes with it the erosion of our confidence and our conviction. If we stop doing something, baking bread, reading maps, writing code, developing business plans, choosing to outsource it to an efficient digital companion, we must accept that we will start to lose the skills and the capabilities that we spent years building. We need, therefore, to protect those capabilities deemed essential for human flourishing. These capabilities, from creativity and craft to community building and indulging our curiosity, make us feel more human, building up our confidence, developing mastery, and enabling agency. Conclusion. The vaguely dystopian motto of the 1933 Chicago World's Fair stated simply, "Science finds, industry applies, man conforms." Updated for the 21st century, we might consider the following motto, possibly at Davos instead of in Chicago. Capitalism mandates, science finds, industry applies, man conforms. Somewhere along the way, we lost our agency, our ability to set the terms of the debate, our ability to drive outcomes that align with flourishing. Somewhere along the way, we lost our humanity, being viewed by hungry technology companies merely as wallets and eyeballs. We have mixed up the purpose of all this striving, all this progress. Success has been fatally reduced to mere revenue growth and return on investment. Human flourishing barely gets a look in. It is hard not to be resigned to the inevitability of it all. However, it is possible to reclaim our humanity, inch by precious inch. We must erect a cordon sanitaire around nature, our homes, and our minds. As we exploit the functions of an oven or a washing machine, we must exploit artificial intelligence, using it for our benefit. The lifeblood of these technologies and the business models of their owners is to keep us logging in, catching up, staying online. The march of digital omniscience is therefore only inevitable if we choose to dive even deeper into the digital world. Stepping out for an afternoon, taking a walk, turning off our phones, provides a sense of perspective, and with it, a scintilla of hope. The more free spaces we erect, in nature, in homes, and in our minds, the more we start to agree with Shoshana Zuboff, who ends surveillance capitalism with 3 simple words. I reject inevitability.